The boat dives at a precise angle, the deck tilts a few degrees, and the last gray rectangle of daylight disappears as the bridge hatch seals. From that moment, the crew of a Los Angeles-class or Virginia-class fast-attack submarine lives inside a steel cylinder roughly 360 feet long and 34 feet wide, lit entirely by fluorescent tubes and indicator panels. The ocean above the hull may be sunlit at noon or black at midnight. Inside, it makes no difference. The boat keeps its own time. That time is not the time the rest of the Navy keeps. Surface ships run on a 24-hour cycle, 3 sections of watch standing 4 hours on and 8 off, anchored to local sunrise wherever the hull happens to be. Submarines, until very recently, did not. For decades, the standard underway rotation on a fast attack was the 18-hour day, 6 hours on watch, 12 hours off, repeated until the patrol ended. 3 shifts, 18 hours, and a body clock that drifts further from the surface world with every single rotation. The math is brutal in its simplicity. A sailor goes on watch at 0600 ship time on day 1. By day 3 of that rotation, his 0600 watch is happening at what would be midnight on the surface. By the end of the first week, his entire sleep-wake cycle has been peeled off the planet and rebolted onto a schedule no human body evolved to keep. There is no morning light to reset the rhythm, no afternoon slump cued by a setting sun. Only the fluorescent tube overhead and the next watch bill. The Navy knows this. In 2014, following years of internal study and a 2009 report from the Naval Submarine Medical Research Laboratory in Groton, Connecticut, the submarine force began moving most of its boats to a 24-hour watch cycle, typically an 8-on, 16-off, 3-section rotation or a circadian-aligned variant. The research was clear. Sailors on the legacy 18-hour day were running a chronic sleep debt, scoring on fatigue assessments at levels comparable to legal intoxication. Reaction times slowed. Memory recall faltered. Mistakes on a vessel where a single valve in the wrong position can flood a compartment were unacceptable. The change did not delete the underlying problem. It softened it. A sailor on a modern Virginia-class boat still lives without sunlight for the length of the patrol. He still works a job where the watch bill, drills, training, and maintenance routinely push his actual sleep down to 5 hours in a 24-hour cycle. He still wakes in the same red-lit passageway he fell asleep in, unable to tell from any natural cue whether the boat is off the coast of Norway or under the polar ice cap. The 18-hour day is mostly gone. The disorientation it caused is not. Walk the boat from forward to aft, and the absence of the outside world becomes physical. There is no porthole in the wardroom, no skylight in the crew's mess. The control room, where the officer of the deck stands his watch, has no view of anything except sonar displays, fire control consoles, and the periscope optics. And the periscope is only raised at periscope depth, which is a small fraction of any patrol. Most of the time the boat is deep, the periscope is down, and the only image of the ocean is a waterfall of sonar returns drawn in green on a black screen. The lighting is the boat's substitute for a sky. During simulated daytime hours, the passageways and most working spaces run on standard white fluorescent light. At simulated night, the boat shifts to red. This is not mood lighting. The red shift preserves night vision for anyone who might need to use the periscope, and it gives the crew a visual cue that the off-going watch should be sleeping. Walk from the engine room forward at 0200 ship time, and you pass through a long red tunnel of light, past stenciled compartment labels and the soft hum of the ventilation system, with men in coveralls moving silently because other men behind thin curtains are trying to sleep. There is a specific texture to that silence. A submarine is never truly quiet. There is always the low background of the ventilation, the faint whine of pumps, the occasional creak as the hull adjusts to pressure changes during depth excursions. But the human noise is suppressed to an almost monastic level. Sailors learn to speak at half volume in the passageways. Doors are eased shut, not slammed. Even climbing a ladder is done with a practiced economy of motion, because a heavy boot landing on a steel rung travels through the hull and into a rack 3 compartments away. Submariners call this rig for quiet, but it is also simply how the boat lives all the time. Noise discipline is not a drill. It is a habit imprinted in the first patrol and never lost. Sleep is its own engineering problem. A Los Angeles-class submarine has an official crew complement of roughly 129, about 13 officers and 116 enlisted. A Virginia-class carries around 135. The hull is not large enough to give every sailor a permanent rack. On most fast attacks during a fully manned deployment, the junior enlisted in forward berthing practice what the Navy calls hot racking. 3 sailors assigned to 2 bunks, or in tighter cases, 3 sailors to 1 bunk, rotating through it according to their watch sections. When one man goes on watch, another rolls into the still warm rack he just left. The rack itself is a coffin-sized box, roughly 76 inches long, 24 inches wide at the head, narrower at the foot, and barely 20 inches of vertical clearance from mattress to the rack above. A sailor cannot sit up in it. He slides in from the side, draws a curtain across the opening, switches on a small reading light if he wants one, and that volume of stale, recycled air becomes the only private space he will have for the next 90 days. Underneath the mattress is a single shallow drawer, the coffin locker for every personal item he brought aboard. Uniforms, books, photographs, toothbrush. That is the inventory of his life at sea. Think about what that means. The entire physical footprint a submariner owns for 3 months is smaller than the trunk of a mid-size sedan. Hot racking is not unique to submarines. Some surface ships practice it during high manning periods, but on a fast attack, it is the baseline assumption, not the exception. The sheets on a hot-racked bunk are changed on a schedule, not after each occupant. The pillow belongs to the rack, not the man. New sailors, the nukes and sonar techs reporting straight from school, are the most likely to draw the hot rack assignment. Chiefs and officers get permanent racks. Rank on a submarine is measured first in qualifications and second in how many other people have touched your pillow. The air the crew breathes is also engineered. A submerged submarine cannot open a hatch for fresh oxygen, so the boat manufactures its own atmosphere. Oxygen is generated by electrolysis of seawater, splitting H2O into hydrogen, which is pumped overboard, and oxygen, which is released into the boat. Carbon dioxide, exhaled steadily by 130 men in a sealed tube, is scrubbed out by chemical absorbers using either monoethanolamine, known as MEA, or lithium hydroxide canisters in emergencies. Other contaminants, cooking smoke, off-gassing from electronics, the cumulative human funk of 100+ unwashed bodies, are filtered through catalytic burners and charcoal beds. The result is breathable. It is not pleasant. Submariners describe the atmosphere after the first 2 weeks as having a flavor, an oily, faintly sweet, faintly metallic taste that clings to clothing, to skin, to the small paperback books in the crew's library. Veterans say the smell stays recognizable for months after the patrol ends. A wife greeting her husband on the pier in Groton or Pearl Harbor can pick it up from across the brow. They call it the boat. It does not wash out of fabric on the first cycle. The atmospheric monitoring is constant. A panel in the control room tracks oxygen percentage, carbon dioxide parts per million, carbon monoxide, hydrogen, refrigerants, and a list of other trace gases that civilian life never thinks about. The acceptable range for oxygen on a submerged boat is narrower than the open atmosphere. Too high, and fire risk climbs sharply. Too low, and crew cognition degrades. CO2 is typically held below about 0.5%, though it can creep higher during heavy exertion periods like drills. Sailors learn to read the symptoms in themselves before the alarms catch them. The slight headache, the heaviness in the limbs, the irritability that has no other cause.
When the auxiliary division reports the scrubbers are running hot, the whole crew feels the difference within an hour. Food is the one thing the Navy does not skimp on. Submarine galleys have a long-standing reputation for serving the best food in the fleet, and the reputation is earned partly through compensation. The boat cannot give the crew sunlight, fresh air, exercise space, or privacy. It can give them 4 full meals a day, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and midrats, the midnight rations served for the watchstanders coming off the midwatch. The mess on a Virginia-class seats maybe 20 men at once. The crew rotates through in shifts, the same way they rotate through everything else. The provisioning before patrol is a small spectacle. In the days before the boat gets underway, pallets of frozen meat, canned goods, dry stores, eggs, milk, produce, and cases of soda are loaded down through every available hatch. There is not enough dedicated storage for 90 days of food, so the overflow is stowed in passageways, lashed down on top of equipment, and, most famously, laid in flat cases across the deck plates of the lower-level passageways. For the first 2 or 3 weeks of the patrol, the crew literally walks on the food, the deck rising by a foot or more in some compartments. As the stores are eaten down, the deck slowly drops back to normal. A submariner can estimate how far into a patrol he is by how much canned goods are left under his boots. You might ask why the Navy doesn't simply build bigger boats with more bunks and a window or two. The answer is that every cubic foot of internal volume on a submarine is a cubic foot of pressure hull that has to be welded, tested, and certified to survive crush depth. A window, even a thick acrylic viewport, is a structural weakness in a hull rated for depths where water pressure is measured in thousands of pounds per square inch. The boat is shaped the way it is because the ocean wants to collapse it, and every concession to crew comfort is a concession the engineers have to defend in tons of steel. The second question, why not give everyone their own rack? Same answer, refined. To give 135 sailors permanent berthing on a Virginia-class would require lengthening the hull, which means more reactor power to move the same boat at the same speed, which means a larger reactor, which means a larger hull, which means more crew to operate it. The design spiral devours itself. Hot racking exists because it is the only way to fit a full watch bill into a hull small enough to be tactically useful. The third question, doesn't this break people? Sometimes. The submarine force has one of the most rigorous psychological screening processes in the Navy. Candidates for submarine school go through interviews and assessments designed to filter out claustrophobia, severe introversion that cannot tolerate close quarters, and the kind of personality that does not handle authority well in a confined space. The attrition rate at the Naval Submarine School in Groton for the basic enlisted submarine course has historically run between 15 and 25%. Some of that is academic. Some of it is the boat itself in mock-up form, telling a young sailor that this life is not for him. For the ones who stay, the adaptation is gradual and strange. Sailors describe the first week underway as the hardest. The body still wants the surface clock, still expects daylight, still rebels against sleeping at what feels like 3 p.m. By the end of week 2, The rebellion fades. The boat becomes the world. Shore time, the world of grass and traffic and weather, recedes into something theoretical. There is the watch, the rack, the meal, the next watch. The cycle is its own gravity. Then there is the matter of contact with home. On a fast attack submarine on patrol, internet access is not 15 to 30 minutes of MWR-rationed bandwidth, the way it is on a carrier. It is, for most of the deployment, nothing at all. Email is handled through a system called the familygram on older boats and a more modern equivalent on newer ones, short, text-only messages, limited in word count, transmitted in batches when the boat comes to communications depth.
Familygrams are one way for most of the patrol. Family can send to the sailor, but the sailor cannot reply. A wife can announce a pregnancy. A father can report a death. The submariner reads the message in the red light of the crew's mess and goes back on watch. This is the part that civilians almost always underestimate. The physical confinement is real, but adaptable. Humans have lived in worse spaces for longer. What is harder to adapt to is the informational silence, the deliberate severance from the news cycle, from family routine, from the small, ordinary updates that make a life feel continuous. A sailor on a 90-day patrol returns to a world that has moved without him in ways no one can quite summarize. Elections happen. Someone gets married. A favorite restaurant closes. The man in the rack missed all of it, and there is no way to be told it that does not feel like being told about a different planet. The submarine force calls this the patrol gap, and it is one of the documented stressors on submarine marriages and families. The Naval Submarine Medical Research Laboratory has studied it. The numbers are not flattering, and they are not the point of this video, but they exist. The Navy provides counseling resources at every submarine home port, runs ombudsman programs for spouses, and conducts a structured reintegration period after every long patrol. The system works exactly as designed. That is the problem. It is designed around the fact that the gap cannot be closed, only managed. Drills punctuate the artificial day. A fast attack runs continuous training underway. Fire in the engine room, flooding in the torpedo room, reactor scrams, atmosphere casualties. The drills can come at any hour of the ship's clock, which means at any hour of any individual sailor's personal cycle. A man asleep at his 0300, really 1500 ship time, or 0900 ship time, or whatever the watch bill says, hears the announcement over the 1MC and is out of his rack in seconds, into coveralls, running toward his casualty station. Sleep on a submarine is not a state. It is a pause, indefinitely interruptible. A fire drill is the most physically punishing. Real fires on submarines are catastrophic. There is nowhere to go, no way to vent smoke outside, so the drills are conducted in full firefighting ensemble, with emergency air-breathing masks plugged into the boat's manifold system, and the responders move at a sprint through hot, cramped compartments. A man pulled from REM sleep, in his rack, in the dark, finds himself 90 seconds later wedged into a turn in the engine room with a charged hose in his hands and a chief screaming at him to move faster. The transition from unconscious to maximum exertion happens with no buffer. After the drill, the critique runs another hour. Then he goes back to his rack, if his watch hasn't come up in the meantime, and tries to sleep again on a body still flushed with adrenaline. The head, the bathroom, is shared, and the showers are shorter than most civilians can imagine. Fresh water on a submarine is made by distilling seawater through evaporators, and while a fast attack has more capacity than a small surface ship, water is still rationed by habit and by command policy. A Navy shower is the standard. Water on to wet down, water off to soap up, water on briefly to rinse. Total water time, often under 2 minutes. Laundry runs on a schedule.
Coveralls, the working uniform of the boat, are worn until they need to be washed, then washed in batches, then reissued. Some sailors keep one set of good coveralls for the day they pull into port. Port calls on fast attack patrols are rarer than on surface ships. A destroyer or cruiser on a standard 6-month deployment might pull into a friendly port every 3 to 4 weeks for 3 to 5 days of liberty. A submarine on patrol may not surface for port at all, or may make one brief stop at a specific location for logistics, with restricted liberty for only part of the crew. The submarine force operates on a different deployment economy. The boat is most useful when no one knows where it is. Pulling into a foreign port tells everyone exactly where it is. When the patrol ends, the boat comes home.
The hull surfaces, the bridge hatch is cracked, and the first sailors up the ladder feel real wind on their faces for the first time in months. Veterans describe the moment in nearly identical language across decades of memoirs and oral histories. The smell of land hits first, before anything is visible. Diesel, asphalt, vegetation, salt. The layered scent of a coastline carries a long way over open water, and a nose that has smelled nothing but recycled air and amine scrubber for 90 days picks it up like a dog. Then comes light. The sun, even a cloudy sun, even a winter sun in New England or the Pacific Northwest, is brighter than anything the crew has seen in months. Submariners coming off long patrols report headaches, watery eyes, and a kind of overwhelmed exhaustion in the first hours topside. Some wear sunglasses for days. The body adjusts back faster than it adjusted out, but the adjustment is real. The eye has been calibrated for fluorescent tubes and red night lighting. The sky on day one is a physical assault. The first meals ashore are another small reckoning. Fresh produce after weeks of canned and frozen substitutes registers as almost overwhelming on the palate. A bite of an actual apple, the crunch of a salad that has not been wilted by 90 days in a reefer, a glass of cold milk that has not been reconstituted. Submariners talk about these moments with the specificity of men describing a first kiss.
The galley on the boat is genuinely good, but it is operating against a finite supply curve. By week 10, the lettuce is a memory, the eggs are powdered, and the milk has been gone since week 3. The first cheeseburger in a pierside bar in Groton is not just food. It is proof that the surface world still works. The boat ties up. The crew musters on the pier. Families are waiting. The men come down the brow in their service uniforms, blinking, carrying small bags. The patrol that consumed 3 months of their lives, that ran them through 18-hour or 24-hour cycles, disconnected from the sun, that hot-racked them and red-lit them and fed them mid-rats at midnight ship time. That patrol is, officially, over. The boat will refit. The crew will rotate to leave and training. In a few months, the cycle will begin again. The opening image was a hatch ceiling, and the last grey rectangle of daylight disappearing. The closing image is the same hatch opening from the other side, the same rectangle of daylight returning, the same crew filing through it in the opposite direction. The men who walk off the boat are not the men who walked on. They are tireder, paler, leaner, quieter. They know things about their own bodies and their own minds that no surface sailor knows. They know what it is to live, voluntarily, inside a machine designed to make the ocean forget they exist. The fast attack has no windows. It cannot have windows.
Windows are what the rest of the Navy has, and the rest of the Navy does a different job. The submarine's job is to be invisible, and invisibility is paid for, partly in steel and reactor fuel, but mostly in the circadian rhythms of about 130 men at a time. The Navy has studied the cost. The Navy tried, with the 24-hour watch transition, to soften it, but the basic equation does not change.
Somewhere in the Atlantic or the Pacific or under the Arctic ice, right now, a boat is running on its own clock, its passageways shifting from white to red and back to white, its galleys serving midrats, its racks warm from the man who just left them. He does not know what time it is on the surface. He does not need to.